establishment of startups under the patronage of Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor R.P. Tiwari, Central University, Punjab, Batinda. We will share few secret tips in the masterclass so that you can understand the basic fundamentals related to IPR and IP management to establish a startup. By the end of this session, you will understand the basic concepts of IPR and IP management to develop a startup in your future career. On this context, today we have Dr. Hiran Vedam, who will share her expertise and experience on this topic. Therefore, I would like to invite Dr. Punita Pandey to introduce our distinguished speaker to the audience.
Thank you, Dr. Devupriya. Uh, Dear participants, it's a privilege to introduce Dr. Hiran Vedam ma'am to you all. Ma'am is a business consultant for investors and startups in climate technology. She is also senior advisor for innovation and entrepreneurship at IIT Tirupati. Ma'am has considerable experience in different areas of the lab to market journey, from research to entrepreneurship, technology transfer, and early stage investments in US, UK, Singapore, and our country. So, ma'am is the editor of AIM Prime Playbook, a practical guide to science-based entrepreneurs, published by Venture Center and Atal Innovation Mission, India. Ma'am also has her own YouTube channel, World of Deep Tech, which has the purpose of familiarizing young researchers on various aspects of guiding mentors, various aspects of commercializing advanced technologies. She also developed a mentoring framework for guiding mentors of science-based startups in collaboration with seasoned angel investors. So, ma'am is a chemical engineer with PhD from Purdue University, MS from Washington University, and a BTech from IIT Madras. She also has an MBA from INSEAT. So, participants, I'm sure you all will learn a lot from ma'am today. We welcome you, ma'am, for your expert lecture today.
Ma'am, unmute yourself, ma'am.
Thank you very much for that warm introduction. So shall I start the talk?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Okay, so today I'll be talking to you about the intellectual property and IP management. And what are the various facets of it, and how a startup can use IP as a very powerful tool in managing a startup. Before I begin, do you have any questions? If so, please type them in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask them. I suppose not. So. Okay, let me go ahead with the presentation then. So today I will start the discussion with talking about different forms of intellectual property, delve a little bit deeper into patents and design, which form the basis of most science-based startups or engineering-based startups, and give you a flavor for contracts which are important in the context of commercializing them, including non-disclosure agreement, joint development agreement, and licensing, and how startups can optimize their intellectual property. So intellectual property, I mean, what do we mean by that? It is a way to protect the creations of the mind, such as inventions, literary works, or artistic works. So anything that you create with your mind, it could be music, it could be books, it could be blogs you write, all of these can be protected by intellectual property. So it doesn't just protect an idea, it has to be reduced to practice. That's the key. And some forms of intellectual property are protected by default. like copyrights are default rights that you get. Anything you write, whether it's a piece of software code or whether it's a document you write, the copyright by default belongs to you or whomever you have assigned it to. And generally, these the intellectual property rights are intangible. What does intangible mean? If you own a car or if you own a house or some gadget, you have a physical object or some physical entity that you have possession of or you ownership over. Unlike them, intellectual property is intangible. So if somebody asks you to show me that you have rights on this intellectual property, the best you can do is show a certificate from the government that says, okay, you own the intellectual property, or some tag you put on your copyrighted material that says it's copyrighted by you. Beyond that, it is the whole property is not something you can touch and feel. So that's why it's intangible. Okay. Why does several governments provide you these IP rights for various forms of intellectual property? And you have to ask yourself why governments encourage you to file intellectual property and governments help protect your intellectual property rights. One of the reasons is that it creates a way for creators to share information freely. So if I know that if I put something in the public domain, I still have ownership over it, then I'm more likely to share that information with somebody else. Okay, so that allows the creators to share information freely. It rewards creativity and intellect because, you created it, so you own it. So it provides some kind of a recognition to the person who created it or people who created it. And that's one way to reward the creativity and intellect. And it allows the creators to govern the use of their intellectual property. So think of a mango tree that's on the street versus a mango tree within your backyard. A mango tree that's on the street, the fruits that come out of it, anybody can go and pluck it. Okay, there is no rules that govern who can take those mangoes, when they can take the mangoes, how they can take the mangoes, and so on. But if it is in your backyard, you could choose to get somebody to pluck all those mangoes and give it away free to your neighbors or children in your neighborhood. Or you could choose to use it to make your achar or other things in your home. Or you could take it to the market and sell it. But what you do with it is entirely governed by you. So by giving you this IP rights, government is allowing you to govern how you use these how others can use the intellectual property you've created. And because you have that control, you're more likely, and you're rewarded for it, you're more likely to create new things. And it provides an incentive. Maybe you could make some money out of it, or you could gain some prestige out of it, or you could further your career by owning this intellectual property. And all of this helps encourage creativity in the society. And because the intellectual property is in the public domain, others can build over it, right? Science doesn't get built in isolation. People build over each other's ideas. And by having these different forms of creative outputs in the public domain, it helps people combine two of them, or take something and build something over it, and hopefully not pirate it and use it without acknowledging the inventors and their rights. But it always helps you encourage creativity. right? So that's why governments want to help you protect the various forms of intellectual property. And there are several forms of it, ranging from patents and industrial design that you may be more familiar with in the science and engineering disciplines, to plant breed rights, semiconductor chip design. These are less popular ones from science and engineering perspective. But the general public, when they think of intellectual property, they think of trademarks, they think of copyrights, trade secrets, or geographical indicators. So let's try to get a flavor for each of them. But before I do that, I would like to pause and ask if there are any questions any of you have. You can type them in your chat box.
Ma'am, no questions as of yet.
Okay, fine.
I'll ask this.
Okay, all right. So copyrights, these are the rights that govern your, creative endeavors. So a movie or a drama or music or a piece of art you painted or a sound recording you've done or a book you've written, all of these are examples of copyrights. A software you have written, the algorithm can be potentially covered by a patent, but the code itself is generally covered by a copyright, right? And there are trademarks. This could be a sign that distinguishes one brand from another and gives recognition to a particular organization, so that it reduces counterfeiting. It also evokes certain emotions or a certain softer, associations with the product. So, there are, things like, yeah, right choice, baby. I mean, when you say that, you know which brand you're talking about, right? Or, when you see the tick mark, you associate it with the can-do attitude of Nike. And if you look at, Toyota symbol, there is a certain association of a family car that goes with it, and a certain segment of the market that it targets, because that symbol is associated with a certain company and the products, right? So they are. So it could be a jingle, it could be a symbol, it could be a tagline. All of this could be trademarked. Geographical indicators. So these are products that are made in specific geographies that have certain special associations. Coming from Tirupati, I mean, I can think of Tirupati Laddu, which is unique. I mean, there are people make laddus all over, but Tirupati Laddu is Tirupati Laddu. It is special, right? Or Kanjivaram saris, or Kolhapur chappal. I mean, there are different kinds of chappal that we make, but the footwear that are made in Kolhapur are special, and they are tagged as if you make the same chappal somewhere else, you cannot call them Kolhapur chappal. Okay. Similarly, I mean, Rasagulla versus Rasagulla. I mean, the West Bengal versus Odisha. There was, who gets the tag and what is the difference and so on, right? So all these are geographical indicators that are given to specific products that are grown in specific regions of the world. Okay. Then there are trade secrets. If you are familiar with the Charlie's chocolate factory, he had these Oompa Loompas who would make all his exotic chocolates and chocolate-based products, and they were quite happy with whatever rewards he gave them in terms of space, in terms of being able to live there without being disturbed by others, and so on. And they would never reveal their the secrets, Wonka's secrets, to anybody else. But generally, the secret recipe, for example, Coke's recipe, or the know-how associated with your with your technology that you develop, these are harder to protect because it's not easy to capture them in a way that you can protect them using the instruments that are available, that are provided by the government. And in many cases, you may not want to put it in public domain, even with that protection. So you want to keep them as trade secrets, right? So these are the ones that are that remain within a select group of people within the organization, that is not made public, and it is that secret sauce that makes the technology work, or that product unique, or something that is that's only held by a few people within an organization. And protecting anything using trade secrets is very hard, because you have to create a way to employee agreements and access controls and all of this, so that it is not shared outside the organization. The upside is that there is no time limit. I mean, when a government gives you the right, like patents or design rights or trademarks and all of this, they have a particular time frame after which you don't have that privilege associated with it. So it is not exclusive to you anymore. So, but a trade secret, because you have not put it in the public, can potentially remain with you and continue to provide that barrier to entry for your competitors. So the other one, the other form of intellectual property is semiconductor chip design. This is newer kind of intellectual property. I mean, now you have these NFTs and all of this, but this was this came into existence. In after the 2000, so maybe 2005, something like that. So Texas Instruments was the first one to get it, and how much protection you can get for chip design varies from country to country. But the licensing, you can actually protect your chip design and share it, sell it to others. Plant breeders' rights. So you might have, new varieties of plants. Maybe they are more disease resistant or pest resistant, or a way to form new breeds of plants and animals. These could be, plants especially, that you can use to protect, that can be protected under the plant breeders' rights. Okay, so now let's come to patents, which are, form of intellectual property that is that's more used within the scientific community to protect the inventions they make in their labs, right? So patents are, it's an exclusionary right. I'll explain to you what exclusionary right is in a minute. It's granted by a country for a fixed period of time in exchange for full disclosure of an invention. The invention has to be new, non-obvious and useful. Okay, so each of these terms have specific meanings, and we'll try to understand a little bit of it here in the next few slides. So it is granted by a country, okay, which means, It is granted by a country, which means that it is territorial. If I have a patent right in India, doesn't mean that it is protected in China. Okay, if you want patent protection in China, you have to file for a patent protection in China. You want it in the US, you have to protect it in the US. So it's you have to file for patent protection in each country separately. It is for a fixed period of time, generally 20 years from the date or from your priority date, the first date where you filed your patent application. And the key is full disclosure. So you cannot reveal, you have to disclose the temperatures, the pressures, all the conditions that are required for a person skilled in the art to replicate your invention. So, let's say your temperature range is, 20 to 40 degrees. You should disclose that. You may be able to say that, okay, 32 degrees is the best. You got your best results at 32. You need not reveal that 32, but you have to reveal the 20 to 40 for sure. Okay. So the ranges and the kind of conditions that you give can be broad, but the real values have to be within the disclosed document. Okay, and invention. So what do we mean by an invention? It has to be an idea that is new, not obvious, and useful, and it needs to be reduced to practice, which means I cannot say, oh, well, I dreamed up on this new idea today and I'll go patent it, because you have to show some evidence of actual working of that idea, or how you have actually reduced that idea to practice. Okay. As I mentioned, many people consider patents to be somehow an enhancement of scientific merit. There will be researchers who say that, well, they will pressure the IP cell to file for a patent, even though the IP cell might evaluate it and consider that there is no commercial value in it, because they want to see, they see that as somehow like a published paper or something like that. The published paper and your H index and all of this is very different than actually getting a patent, and the reason why you should be applying for a patent. It has something to do with scientific merit, but it has more to do with what you can do with that right that you get. Okay, and it is not mandatory to get a license to file for a patent in order to license the technology. You could always license software without any patent protection. You get your copyright protection by default, but you don't have to actually file for a patent. Okay, and it is purely commercially driven. Can you file for a patent, and can you actually commercialize that technology? That should be the driver in deciding whether you should file for a patent or not. Could I request everybody to mute yourself, please?
Yeah.
Or could the organizers mute everybody?
Students, please mute yourself.
And as I mentioned, it's territorial. So if I get a patent protection in India, it's only valid in India. And one of the reasons I emphasize the commercial aspect of patent filing is because it is expensive. Filing a good patent application.
Madhrendra, please mute yourself.
Filing a good
म्यूट कर दिया आपने सर कैसे करूँ मैं मैम योर माइक इज म्यूटेड मैम हाँ थैंक यू
Yeah. So patent protection is expensive. A good patent draft would cost you, drafting and filing in India costs anywhere from 70 to 80K. And over its lifetime, a US patent can cost up to $70,000. So definitely expensive. So you have to think through, why you're filing it. What kind of commercial returns do you expect to get out of it? Okay. So let's look at what are the patents and its anatomy. What does a patent document look like? Generally, a patent document will have title, the list of inventors, assignee. So by default, a patent is owned by the inventors who who came up with the invention. So in order to, and generally if they are employed by some organization or they want to, license the technology to someone or assign the technology to somebody else, the inventors can assign their rights to their employer or to a licensee or an assignee. Okay. So, and generally it is the assignee who will file, at least in the Indian context, it is assignee who pays for it and files the patent. And there are patents, there are several hundreds of thousands of patents. And one way to keep track of what's happening and who is filing in which discipline is by assigning classification codes. So these classification codes tell you where the patent examiner sees it fitting in this broad, a sea of the number of patents that people have filed. There are international patent classification codes. There are US specific patent classification codes, and World Intellectual Property Organization is the one responsible for the international classification codes. And you go there, you can, if you type that, it will give you detailed description of the classification code and what is all covered under that. And it's very useful for you when you're searching for people, patents in a specific area. Generally, when you do your literature search, you tend to use keywords or maybe, a particular researcher's name, all of that. But that provides you limited scope in identifying relevant patents if you're trying to do a patent search. So you have to use keywords along with classification codes in order to get at patents that are most relevant to what you're trying to do. Okay. Priority information. This includes the first filing you've done. Maybe you filed a provisional application on certain date. Then you file the actual patent application. Maybe you filed an application with the Patent Cooperation Treaty. And from there you file national patents applications in China, US, wherever. So all that information is provided in the priority information. You may have cited some things that are relevant in your background section. So citations, who is the examiner, who is the or patent agent who is actually allowed the claims that are in the patent and said, okay, this patent can be granted. So the examiner or the person who is actually evaluating it right now. So that's the examiner details. When you file, the things that you need to provide a patent office is a brief abstract, some background of why you're inventing what you're inventing, and what's new, describing the context to your invention. a summary and description of the invention. This is where only information about your invention goes. Examples, maybe you can configure your product in different ways, or you can use the method differently. So you can give examples of how it can be used differently, or how the product can be configured differently, and so on in the examples. And the most important parts are the claims, which set the boundaries for your intellectual property. So for example, if you own a piece of land, generally your the land patta, or the document, the legal registered document, will tell you, okay, I mean, this is the area, what's on your north, what's on your south, what's on your east, and it will describe all the boundaries, right? So the claims are similar to that. Claims define the boundaries of the invention that is covered by the patent, and the drawings support these claims and the examples that you have defined in the document. Okay, so all these things that are marked in red are very important things that you need to include in the patent application. So generally, the bottom four that I've highlighted are included in what are known as specifications. So when the people talk about patents, they talk about patent specifications. And these are the ones that we are talking about. And the important thing is, once you file a patent application with the office, you cannot add anything new to these specifications. So because it's a legal document, right? Unlike your journal paper, where, based on the reviews you get, you can always add new material to answer or address the concerns of your your reviewers. In a patent document, once the patent agent comes back and says, okay, I'll allow these claims, I won't allow these claims, you can modify your claims, but based on whatever you put in your specifications. Okay, you cannot say, oh, well, I have these new results, I will put in them. No, you cannot do that. So which is why drafting a patent document well is very important. Okay, and claims we talked about. And there are different kinds of patents you can get. You can get patents for a process or method for doing something, or a machine. So it could be a device or a machine, or a manufactured article. So it could be a widget that you have manufactured, or composition of matter. If you are a chemist, or working in pharmaceutical industry or metallurgy, you could come up with a new composition of matter, or a nanocomposite material. All of these can be covered in the composition of matter kind of patent. Okay, so this is kind of like a very broad overview of what patents are and what's actually in that document. And how does the patent examiner evaluate it? There are three criteria the examiner uses. One is novelty. So is it new? Okay, so nobody should have created something similar. So that's, for most researchers, this is not a problem, because I mean, as a researcher, you are coming up with new things, and that's, you know how to do it well. So that's novelty. The second aspect is, is it inventive or non-obvious? Okay, so this is where people get into trouble with the patent office most of the time, because if you say you took a chair and a sofa and combine both of them into making something like a reclinable chair, for example, the examiner will look at it and say, well, I mean, is this obvious, or is this something a person skilled in the art, or somebody with enough knowledge about the domains would have come up with anyway? Okay, and if they say it is, they could have come up with anyway, then it is obvious and it cannot be patented. If it is something that is not easily obvious to anybody in the domain or in the field, then it would be considered inventive. I mean, there is a whole lot of science and a bit of art in defining what is non-obvious and inventive. But this is one of the key criteria, and where most researchers struggle to get past the patent examiner. Okay, and the third aspect is that, is it useful? Okay, does it have a utility? So let's say you came up with a product to count the number of sand particles on a beach. Okay, well, I mean, it might be new, it might be non-obvious. Nobody had thought of coming up with a machine to count the sand particles in a beach, but is it really useful? It may be. You have to prove how it is useful. So the utility, different patent offices take slightly different views on how much importance they place on utility. For example, Japanese patent office puts a lot of emphasis on utility. Other offices may have less emphasis on it, because they may consider it that, okay, well, it's not obvious how you will use it today, but I mean, in the future, somebody will come up with, think about it. So then it might be a little bit easier to pass on that criteria. But you have to show some kind of utility, either current or future, in order to qualify to get a patent. All right. So the next thing is to say, what is the timeline? Okay, let's try to understand how, I mean, you file for a provisional application today, what happens to it, and what's the timeline for filing a patent. So the date you file your provisional with your patent office is called the priority date. And that's the most important date. And it is like, your Lakshman Rekha. Any intellectual property that was developed the minute or second before that priority date is considered prior art in evaluating your patent application. Anything that came after that will not be considered prior art for your application. So it's very important to file early and file it well, because this priority date makes all the difference in whether you get a patent or not, especially in those areas where there is a lot of exciting things happening and new inventions are happening on a daily basis. Okay. So what happens? So you file it, you have 12 months to regularize it. So you can either file a full patent or abandon it at that point. And if you abandon it at that point, nothing happens, and you lose the priority date, and that's the end of the story. But if you want to ensure you protect your right, then you have to do one of two things before the 12-month deadline. One is to file an Indian patent, or to file a PCT filing with the World Intellectual Property Organization. Okay, so this PCT filing will allow you a further 18 months. Okay, I'll come to that. So when you file, let's say you file for a PCT application, around 3 to 4 months after that, you will get an international search report. So some patent office, in your PCT application, you would say whether you want it to be Korea, European Patent Office, or Australia, some international patent office. They will do a quick search, and they will give you a report to say which of the claims are allowed, which of these claims are not allowed. Okay. And at 18 months, from the time of your priority date, the patent application becomes public. Okay, so now it's in public domain for others to use or to challenge or any of these. Okay, and at 30-month deadline is very important if you've filed a PCT. So PCT gives you that 18 months to consider which national offices you want to file your national application. Because it is territorial, This means that you have 30 months from your initial priority date to decide which countries you want to get patent protection. From a startup perspective, this is very important because for a startup, they don't have enough funds. Okay, very little money is available. The strategy of the startup is evolving. They really are not clear which markets they would be targeting, which product even they will be developing, and how whether whom they will be working collaborating with. All of this, right? So this 30 months gives you an opportunity to think about all your business decisions and then decide which countries you want to get the patent protection. So you've decided you want to do manufacturing in China, then you should get patent protection for the process in China. Okay, if you're thinking only like marketing in Europe, then you don't need to file an process patent protection in Europe because your process is done somewhere else. But product patents you have to file in Europe because you're going to be selling the product in Europe. So based on that, you can decide, and that time that's why it's very important. So let's say 30th month deadline comes and you file nothing. What happens? PCT expires and you have no patent protection anywhere. Okay. But if you decide national filing, of course, if you had done a national filing, you would still have protection in the country. Let's say you filed national protection at 12-month mark in India, you still have protection in India, but all others have expired at 30 months if you have not filed anywhere else. What happens is that the patent examiner looks at it and sends their responses, okay? And these are known as office actions. They will say, well, I will allow this claim, I won't allow this claim, and this is the prior art I have found because of which I cannot allow these claims, and so on, okay? And whether it's non-obvious or whether it is, lacks novelty, all of this will be described in these documents that the patent examiner sends to you, and these are known as office actions. And by 36, so you're talking about 3 to 5 years from the initial priority date, you would either get a grant or your patent patent examiner will say, no, final office action, I cannot allow any of these claims, and then you've lost all the money and time in filing that patent. But getting a patent granted is not the end of the road, because you have to file issue and fee, and on a periodic basis at 3-year mark, 7-year mark, depending on the country. Each country has different threshold timelines. You have to pay a maintenance fee to maintain that exclusivity that your government has given. Okay, so these are known as the maintenance fees that you have to pay. And so total lifetime cost of an Indian filing, excluding whatever time you've spent and whatever your employees have spent, can range anywhere between 55 to 120 plus about 400,000 of maintenance fees. Any questions here?
Yes, ma'am. There was one question. How much does it cost? Or if there is exponential increase in the cost if we offer,
Yes, of course. Yeah. This is the low lifetime cost, like 55,000 for generally initial 55 to 120, 1.2 lakhs for the initial filing and processing. And then you have the maintenance fees. So if you take a patent and keep it live for the duration of the patent protection, 20 years, just the maintenance fees that you have to pay the patent office is around 4 lakhs. Okay, plus your attorney fees and all that is addition to that.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, so let's move forward. So for paid PCT application, you can go to the PCT website and get your information. All right, so the quality of a patent is determined based on the number of claims, the classes of claims, the type of claims, the geographical coverage that should align with your market coverage. I won't delve into each of these, but just want to give you a feel for it. Okay. The other important thing about patents is, as I mentioned earlier, it's an exclusionary right, which means that a patent gives me the right to exclude others from using the invention, but it doesn't give me the right to use the invention myself. So what do I mean by that? So let's say, I talked about this reclining chair earlier, right? So I took, the invention of a chair and invention of a bed and combined it to come up with a reclining chair, some sort of a reclining chair. And let's say the patent office allowed it and I have a patent for it. I can exclude others from making a reclining chair that I have, protected. But I may not be able to make it myself because, the making of the chair itself may be protected by somebody. The making of the bed might be protected by somebody. And since I'm combining those two inventions, I would have to actually license those two in order to make my reclining chair. So if I cannot license, so that's what's known as freedom to operate. Okay. So because it's an exclusionary right, I may have restrictions I may be infringing on others' rights in making the product or the process or, the way it is distributed and so on. And I might have freedom to operate issues in all of these. Okay. And that's why just because you have a patent doesn't mean you can actually go and make your product. And you have to be careful to ensure that you have freedom to operate. And generally, this freedom to operate is very application specific. So several years ago, I was part of a team that developed this, non-destructive testing technology for composite materials. Now, you can use that for testing cracks in wind turbines, or you could use it for, automobile or aircraft, variety of applications, right? So if you look at that, I might have freedom to operate in, aerospace industry, but I may not have protection. I may not be allowed to practice it for wind turbine application. Okay. Similarly, it is geographic. I might have freedom to operate in India, but I might not have freedom to operate in China or in Korea. Okay. So it's geographic specific and also application specific. So that's enough about patents and what we can do with them and what are some of the key things that we need to know about it. So let's look at design rights. So an industrial design is an aesthetic or ornamental aspect of an object. So, if you look at an Apple computer, Apple iPad or an iPhone, it has that round button at the bottom. That is both an aesthetic thing and also integral to the design of the product. Okay, so it makes it maybe nicer. You may have a foldable phone design that you may have protected, new jewelry, a fashionable dress. All of these can be protected using industrial design. They do, again, just like patents, they are exclusionary rights, and these are not necessarily functioning parts of the product. It's basically the aesthetics and maybe that curved design or that can be folded and unfolded for different applications, all of this. Okay, so and they have a if they shouldn't have a function, and in US it's valid for 14 years from the date of issue. In India it's for 15 years, and you have to renew it every 10 years. Okay. Unlike the patents, which are governed by the World Intellectual Property Organization, designs are governed by the Hague Convention. Okay. And the key thing is that it has to look and feel very different from what exists in the market. Okay. And design is something that's not, design rights are not uniform across country. So India has very limited forms of design protection. US has very broad protection around design. So all of this make a difference. Okay, it must be new or original, and it should be industrially reproducible, and it should be implemented. So you need to have a prototype. And in fact, pictures of the prototype need to be sent for you to get a design right. All right, so that's about the various forms of intellectual property. Now let's talk about the contracts. So if I own something and you want to use it, then, or if I want to share that with you, then there are different ways to protect that IP when I share it. And these are governed by contracts. So many of you may be familiar with rental agreements or employment contracts or, codes of conduct. Codes of conduct are not legally binding, but contracts are legally binding. Okay, the first form of contract that most people use when they're sharing intellectual property is the non-disclosure agreement. So let's say I have a patented technology, or I have a piece of software. I want to somebody came and said, well, I'm interested in working with you on it. So collaboration, or I want to license the technology, but I want to really know what is in there. Before you reveal that, you may want to have a non-disclosure agreement where you say whatever is, what's the purpose of the disclosure, what the recipient of the intellectual property can do with that information, how long is the protection for, and what's covered, what's not covered, all of this. Okay. One key thing I want to mention with respect to NDAs is that startups, especially the young entrepreneurs who are doing it for the first time, they try to ask the investors to sign non-disclosure agreements. It almost never happens. So don't try to reveal anything about your technology or your idea if you think somebody can take it and you do something with it, or run with it, and you would lose out somehow. Okay. You should always try to, there are ways to communicate the value of your technology, or there are ways to communicate what you want to, the uniqueness of what you're doing without sharing the technical details. And where possible, that should be your first step. And until much later, you shouldn't require signing of non-disclosure agreements. Okay, even with your potential collaborators, use the same arrangement. But when NDAs are useful tools to ensure you can protect your intellectual property. Okay, so when you're sharing financial or marketing information about your company, showing new products or technology, or receiving services from somebody. So let's say you're trying to outsource manufacturing, or allowing employees, sharing some trade secret with your employees. All of these are reasons where you want to protect NDA, or you want to have some NDAs, right? if the confidential information is like very amorphous, not very codified, then it doesn't make sense to file to ask for an NDA. And in some jurisdictions, contracts are not enforceable, or it may take too long. So why even bother? Or you don't have enough resources to enforce a contract. Okay, startups, for example, don't have enough money to go after a big investor or a corporation if they violate their NDA. Okay, so then what's the point? So you have to ensure, you have to be sensible about when you use non-disclosure agreement. Okay. The other form of contract is a joint development agreement, where let's say you as a startup or as a researcher has some technology. You want to collaborate with a company, either to manufacture the product or to sell the product or develop the product further. Develop a domain-specific application for the technology or something like that. Then you need to have a joint development agreement where you say, okay, I am bringing in this technology. You're bringing in your own intellectual property. It could be your domain-specific knowledge or your manufacturing expertise, whatever. And together we are going to develop this new intellectual property. Who is going to bear the cost? How are the costs are going to be split? What are the commitments by each party? And what are you going to do with the resulting IP that comes out of it? Who owns it? Who can do what with it? So all of these will be codified in this joint development agreement. Okay, it makes sense when there is intellectual property coming from both sides, and each has certain resources and capabilities that is needed to develop this new intellectual property. Okay, and both of you want some sort of the same thing. It's not useful when the definition of collaboration is not well defined. So let's say you're exploring something, then there's no point having a JDA. Okay, and if you're working with a company, let's say an MSME, who has no clue about intellectual property, then there's no point having a JDA, because they wouldn't know what they are signing up for, or they wouldn't even know what to do with the intellectual property. Okay, or there might be government restrictions on collaboration. So let's say, if Mahindra and Tata want to collaborate on coming up with a new SUV, okay, the government might say you cannot do that because you're competing companies, and you might create something that would restrict the consumer choice. Then if that such a restriction exists, then the two parties cannot collaborate. Okay. The third form of contract is the licensing agreement, where you have a patent, somebody wants to take that and then manufacture it. So you might want to license the technology to them. Or you have a piece of software that people want to use directly or want to integrate it in their system. So then they need to license it from you, or they need to buy the whole thing lock, stock and barrel, which is called the assignment. So then you have to identify what exactly is being licensed, what are the terms of the licensing, what is the scope, and what will happen, what's the financial arrangements, warranties, in terms of what warranty are you providing. So are you saying that, let's say they use your piece of software in their system, and the system just crashes, okay? And because they have some performance requirements, the system crash leads to financial losses. Who bears it, okay? And what guarantees do you give that the piece of software works as you have said it will, okay? And what happens if the other party takes your software and makes improvement? Like, well, they look at the software and say, well, I can do this more better, then who owns that improvement? Or if they take your technology and license it to somebody else, what do you get out of it? And what are who maintains the intellectual property? All of these negotiations and the agreement on these are codified in your licensing agreement. Okay, although all these contracts exist, you have to ensure that the parties, especially if it is a collaboration agreement or licensing agreement, make sure the parties are aligned and you have that long-term relationship or mutual goodwill that you have between the parties. And it's important to identify when you ask people to sign the different agreements. If it is too early, it doesn't really make sense. If it's too late, you've already lost, shared everything, and so the other party could walk away. So the timing of the agreements is very important. The other important element is, learning how to communicate the uniqueness of your technology or the uniqueness of your intellectual property without actually disclosing the IP. And I conduct several sessions on that, so I won't go into it. And ability to enter into and get out of agreements, because both parties may get into an agreement in good faith, but life happens, right? And one party may need to pull out, or they may want to modify it, or you may have started out well, but bad blood develops over time, and you want to somehow get out of it. So you need to have that ability to both get in and get out of agreements, and ability to enforce. As I said, if you are a startup, you have limited ability to enforce some of these, and you need to have, and a good way to do this is to have backing of good investors who can, or good organizations that can help you enforce these. And apart from that, also the the enforcement environment in a country. All of this will matter in drafting and in not only deciding which forms of intellectual property protection you get, but what kind of contracts you sign in a particular country and with a particular party. So that's pretty much all I had. I'm quite happy to take any questions you have, and thank you very much for listening to this.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Hiran. Such a nice presentation. You explained the different forms of IPR in a very simple language, and also the important agreement which any startup is supposed to take into consideration. So, students, please let us know if you have any questions. PhD scholars. So, ma'am, actually, our university is an academic institution where we are now trying to make our students aware about voice.
I think maybe you are both on a mobile device and.
Hold on, ma'am. Just hold on. Okay. So, are you audible, ma'am? Are you audible?
हेलो
वो अपना म्यूट किया है
ये ब्लैक मैम अभी आप
I heard the first bit, but not the later part.
I think you can hear us now.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So, ma'am, our university is an academic institution where we are trying to encourage students, and we are also trying to make our students aware so that they could think of becoming entrepreneur in the coming years rather than just being a job seeker. So most of the time the students, they simply ask how to proceed with, like they after getting familiar with the different forms of IPR nicely, and also they are now familiar with the different legal aspects, the agreements which any student or the scholar is supposed to know. So now how to take the very first step, where there is lot of reluctance, and most of the time they don't know any supporting agency which is there to help them, and also to file help them in filing the IPR, so that some part of cost could also be taken care.
See, I think the first port of call for anybody who is interested in starting a company would be the Startup India portal. They have tons of information on various aspects of startups. And also, and the next thing I would do is approach the nearest incubator. Go there, talk to other entrepreneurs. One of the ways I think an institute can encourage entrepreneurship is to have entrepreneurs in your neighborhood or in your circle to come and give talks. Your students can self-organize themselves, participate in competitions. There are so many competitions being rolled out in all fields in India. So students can participate in those competitions, talk to other entrepreneurs, all of this, and incubators who can guide them on how to, what are some of the initial steps they can take to start a company. First and foremost, the students have to establish that the problem they're solving is something that is important and there is enough of a market for it. And there are many steps that they need to follow to do that, and an incubator can help them through that process. And based on that, then they have to think about what kind of product they would build, and how to build it and all of that. So that's the general process, but incubators would be the place where they can learn how to do it. And participating in the competitions, because many of the competitions also give gyan around, how to do many of these things.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. And now may I invite Dr. Yoga Lakshmi for giving formal vote of thanks. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Preeti. As Dr. Preeti said, we are academic institution, we find that hindrance in our students, ma'am. Though we tell them you have an idea, you can go for a startup and all, but there's some hindrance, and that we are not able to actually find a way to solve it. That's the problem which we are facing now. So maybe we can have more inputs from you, and we try to do a ice breaking with our students. Maybe that can help us to facilitate and progress more in this field. And moreover, ma'am, you suggested incubators can be one way, but though our university is not having an incubator as of now, and approaching other incubators also, I don't know, with this small idea, whether they will be able to, whether the incubator will take us, that is also a problem. So somewhere there is yeah, ma'am.
See, some of the more established incubators like CII, SIGN, Venture Center, I'm talking about the ones in your part of the country. Many of these organize so many seminars around various aspects of startups. You can, IPRs, people like you can enroll, sign up for those notifications and then share them with the students, so that they can, just listen to talks about various aspects of doing a startup. Okay. These established incubators also run programs for incubation managers, where they can learn about how to, set up an incubation cell, how should they guide the students. All of this, know-how is transferred to new incubators or new organizations who want to promote startups in their universities. So those would be your first. And if you go to Startup India or Niti Aayog's Atal Innovation portals, there are several documents that are targeting both the startups and the incubation managers, where you can learn about all these aspects. But I still think the best way to motivate a PhD student or a graduate student to take up startup is to let them listen to fellow PhD students, maybe from other institutions similar to yours, who are doing it and maybe have succeeded. Okay, because that helps them think about, well, if this student could do it, why can't I? Okay, and that helps them, that motivates them. It could be undergraduate students who are building successful startups, or postgraduate students who are building successful startups. Bringing in those kind of people who are on their age group or their kind of peers, then it would help them get motivated. And I think participating in these startup competitions where they meet their peers who are doing this would be another great way. If you can't bring them into your campus, getting your students to participate in these competitions is a great way. That makes sense?
Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. I think you would be the right person, like for us. Even you, not I under our, invitation, and really motivate our students. We try to explore the incubator and then see like how we can go about it, and we'll also try to invite you here physically, and we'll have a sort of workshop sort of thing where you can motivate them, you can enrich them like how to go. Thank you, ma'am. With this note, my formal vote of thanks. Thank Dr. Hiran Vedam. Thank you, ma'am. Within a short period, I just gave a call, and then you accepted my invitation, and then you had delivered such a wonderful lecture. Actually, your lecture was very informative. Like it was starting from the base till how we can go about. Like, IPR. I think our student would have benefited a lot. And our sincere thanks to you on this.
It was a pleasure, and I wish you all the best for encouraging your students, and I wish them success.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, bye.
And IPR for encouraging us to conduct such events, and my thanks to the members who had coordinated this this event. Thanks to the chairman and President IISc, Professor event, and to Ms. Usha creation and then operating. Thank you so much. Rice Yeah, thanks covering for the news. Thank you so much. Please rise for the national anthem.
तव शुभ नामे जागे, तव शुभ आशीष मांगे, गान